Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to Lunar Alchemy, the Archetypes and the Elements. My name is John. I'm here with Bella for our last transmission from Sweden for a while. And while the sun is completing its transit through gate 17 at this moment, tonight's moon, at least in the Western Hemisphere, is going to be reflecting the energies of gate 21. So today we are going to speak about Gene Key 21 and the manager archetype and all of the incredible energies that are going along with that are a collective expression of our individual and collective victimhood states, which is very, very interesting because this particular archetype, this gene key, doesn't come right out and say, hey, this is all about being a victim, but this is where we are today in the world. And I'm excited to see where we can get to today with all of that going on. So energies feel lively to me, that we're being impacted by all sorts of cosmic force. So Bella, I'm wondering what your viewpoint is on what's happening right now, and are we feeling the tail end of this last transit, or is there something else happening that's kind of mucking things up for us?
I definitely feel like we are coming into the wound, in a sense. We are here in the thunder fire transits we have been in now, as we're coming has come in Aries. And what I do feel is that we are preparing, and I can feel the energy of some of that agitation, thunder, fire, for when the sun is going to conjunct Chiron, the wounded healer, or the wound. And that's where we are. That's the energy. I feel like we already are. I for me at least, I'm feeling it. And then, yeah, for some of the people that I've spoken with, it just seems too that like life is conspiring so that we are meeting some of those edges where we easily come in contact with that wound that has been there all the time. So it's not necessarily anything new, but when the sun is on it, it's all on the table, you know.
Yeah, so that kind of brings me to Gene Key 21. And normally, as we focus on the archetypes and the elements of these energies, we are not focusing specifically on the shadow frequencies just because we want to be more encompassing. But here, to me, it feels like at a collective level, humanity's very way of functioning in society is so deeply entrenched in this particular shadow that I would feel like we were ignoring what's right in our face if we didn't talk about it. And of course, that shadow is the shadow of control, which leads to the city of valor, and the pathway is that of authority. And one of the ways that I see this shadow coming out, you know, there's so many current events that are happening that are expressions of violation of territory, which is where this shadow really comes into play, whether we're talking about what's going on in Ukraine or we're talking about what happened at the Oscars. There's all of this territory that is getting violated. And it strikes me that humanity right now is at a point where we're able to perceive varying levels of territory. For instance, we have our physical level of our own bodies, and there's a pretty well shared collective belief that no one has a right to do something with someone else's body against their will. And when we look at that from the standpoint of the emotional body, the mental body, things start to get a little bit more gray there. And obviously, if we're looking at the events between Russia and Ukraine, the physical boundaries of nationhood, which is an extension of that individual body, there's discrepancy in the two factions about who's in control of what. And anytime humanity is functioning from this perspective of control, a lot of times when we look at this aspect of territory, the subject that comes up is respect. You have to respect someone else's territory, someone else's body, someone else's feelings, someone else's ideas, whatever it is. And yet, from the shadow of control, there's no room for respect. Because as soon as respect doesn't serve the needs of one's own territory, that respect gets thrown right out the window, as we're witnessing right now. So Bella, what's going on with this archetype? And, for a lot of people who have worked in corporate settings or have ever worked a job where they were an underling, serving the interests of the company or the business or whatever, one of the figures that is often, maybe, I guess, depending on the individual, but just as a rule, a lot of the people who are at that base level of employee may have a conflicting relationship with their manager, whether it's like micromanagement or just personality issues or whatever it is. And the manager isn't always this idea of like, ooh, I can't wait to be around. I can't wait to get managed by somebody else. So what's happening here with our shadow frequency and this archetype that can help us sort of like reorient our focus into a different pattern of behavior so that we can begin to shift these collective levels of relationship, at least at our individual sphere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the manager, the way that we see it here, it is the tribe. So when we are looking at the 31, for example, that is the collective leadership, the leader that is chosen by the collective. And then here we go down one step. So here we're speaking about tribe or community. And in that, inherently in that, it is that the manager, if we use that name, needs to have the best interest of the tribe. Because the survival in the tribal circuitry is the survival of the tribe, of the community. And a leader cannot just care about themselves. So that's inherent. And I think that's where the split has been, that it's not always like that the person who's in charge has everybody's in that group's best interest at heart. And when we speak even about companies, we could say, oh, that's a tribe, but the way in this globalized world, it looks like, I was speaking to my dad about some certification that he was doing the last years he was working. He's an engineer and he was working with quality certifications. And they came in the American part, and it was all about quality, and it looked so like it said so nice about it. And at the end of the day, they came in and said, at the end of the day, it's all about making money. And it was very like said in a blunt way that maybe in Europe we wouldn't actually express it like that. But Americans came in and it's like, that's at the end of the day why we're implementing this. So even just to know that in the globalized world, and even within the same company, cultures are very different in different countries, and it's not always like it feels like the top people that sits in another country that they have your best interests at heart. And that is, I believe, the biggest, when it feels like money and power is not connected to you as the person who's following something, or that's when there is a break, a split, division, and that's everywhere right now.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how pervasively the culture of capitalism has kind of flourished on the planet. And because of that, as I look at this system, it makes me think that, oh, obviously this mechanism is allowing for a great flowering of evolution on certain levels that is being required for humanity to move from one stage to the next. And at the same time, when we think about our territories as expanding from ourself to our family, to our household, to our community, to, you know, maybe our larger culture that we feel connected with, there seems to be these sort of like stumbling blocks along this pathway where we encounter this hierarchy that forces people's interests to be sacrificed in for the benefit of some other, what may seem like a smaller interest to all of the people that are involved. And, you know, it just makes it, when I think about the suggestions, like, how is this transformation actually going to take place? Like, there's this idea that, you know, when a person who is really living the gift of authority is the one who is chosen to be in charge of whatever it is, be it a village, a corporation, a country's political leadership, then what's going to happen is this creation of a version of this coming synarchy, you know, this heterarchy of equal standing between varying roles that within the hierarchy are not seen as equal, as one deserves more pay than another, one deserves more consideration than another, one is expendable while another is you know, just absolutely required for the furthering of the aims of that group. And we have seen a few instances. I was trying to, I didn't look, I should have looked it up. There's a company in Seattle where the CEO raised the minimum salary of every single employee, regardless of their role, to $70,000 a year. And in the process, he took massive pay cuts to himself, to his own. I think he makes the same amount of money as everybody else. And when he did this, he moved forward with it with a very strong message from his heart about how he wanted his business to impact his employees and their experience. And there were all these critics who, you know, thought that, oh, this business will go under within a year, like they'll never survive this, blah, 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 blah. And in the 3 years, I think, since he implemented this, their business has literally tripled. They continue to hire new people. They continue to expand their business. All of these things are working together. So it's not as if this doesn't exist. But on a day-to-day basis, I feel like we have so many decisions to make that are the result of this shadow of control, whether it's paying for rent or our the home that we live in, or it's about some other aspect of how our society is structured that is based on this hierarchy of control, that it's very challenging for a person to move outside of that sort of very like narrow pathway without blowing up everything in their own experience. And it's not that it isn't possible. I've gone through several kind of experiences in my life where I completely stepped outside the box. My life totally transformed kind of within a period of weeks or months. My environment shifted, everything changed. my feeling about what I was doing transformed. But for many people who have a family to support, or rent to pay, or some other type of commitment that is part of it, that is a part of being a part of this societal structure of hierarchy that is based on control. How does engaging this inner manager, how does this impact us in a way that allows us to come into more potential to experience or become a part of this sort of future of heterarchy, or a synergy of synarchy that is being talked about by these gene keys as the potential, and maybe, Bella, this comes into what you're saying about Chiron coming in with the sun shining on it. Like, is there a big wound here that we all have to face before we can move outside of it?
Yeah, I feel similarly to when we were speaking a few weeks ago, and you asked me about the solution for something, but you asked me from the perspective of the problem. And it's almost like if we go to the problem, which control is a huge problem that comes from fear and greed or tightness, what's the solution? So for me, the way that the 21 has come to me, like, it's almost like I hear the word manager and I feel bored, because I know that from the word manager, there is nothing, there's nowhere to go. And the way that this archetype came in for me, first, it's like, the wider character would be the shaman, but really the way it came in like a taita, which is in the Colombian tradition of ayahuasca, or yaje, which is the masculine tradition of ayahuasca. The medicine man is called taita, and he is, for me, that is the ultimate figure of authority that cares about every single person, that decides from their own authority, from their own heart, from their own power and courage to come into that circle and sit there and trust that person in that they came for, to have the authority to guide them through a process of death and rebirth. A process when in that night, when you sit there outside, it's not like the beautiful Peruvian thing where you have your little thing to purge into. No, you're out on the grass, and there is a side often kind of far away where you have to crawl or walk, or the way you can get there to purge into Mother Earth. And then you have to come back. It's often cold, it's often wet, like how nights are. You can hear the animals, you can hear if there are airplanes, usually it makes these weird noises when you're in the ceremony. It's not for the faint-hearted. And that for me is the valor, the courage, the way that the 21 works. It says, are you ready? And it has a bit of that masculine quality to it, of saying, I'm ready to face, I have will, I have determination. It comes from the ego center. And I think somebody here in our inner group was speaking about the ego, that we have been in the inner circle studying, that said, I think that it feels like all these archetypes in the ego have a masculine quality to them. So for me, the 21 has that. It is from the Putumayo tradition, for example, in the mountains of Colombia. These men that have been trained from they were boys to see on a cigar. First, it's such little thing, understanding how a cigar burns and see something in that. And then, it comes out of that 17th jinki of being the seer, of being able to see. And then they have it's that training into bigger and bigger authority, bigger and bigger responsibility. Because at the end of the day, this jinki is about being able and being worthy of taking the responsibility of the people that you're leading. And that you can only do from the power of the heart. So for me, that is the way. And when we come together in those settings, That's where I believe that the seed is planted to a new way of all of us stepping into our authority and starting to trust the people that have the imprint of, we could say, the gift, and the gift more than anything of the 21. So for me, that is the way to start. And like, I would go even further, and we can do that later. I would also say that when it comes with domination and submission, when it comes to who is it that gets to be in the middle of that circle, we are not here to all be the same. This world, this universe is a sexual universe. So we need polarities. And there is something beautiful with feeling into what your role is and playing that role fully. And for me, that's also the ceremony. It's a perfect setting for knowing when you come there is a divine role that you are there to embody in that ceremony. And your process, even if you're not leaking your energy, you're staying in that. So many times I've been in a ceremony and I haven't even spoken to another person, but I have been filled with their energy, with their beauty, with their suffering, whatever it was. They have been a mirror for a part in me. So trusting in that setting, that for me is important. We cannot all be the same. We're not supposed to all be the same. We all have a uniqueness. And for me, the 21 is here to show us that and to have us trust that play that we're here to co-create.
Beautiful. Yeah. I was thinking about this gene key and how, from my perspective, it feels like the gene key for fifth lines. And when we take on this idea of leadership from within this collective shadow of control, that, I really feel as if this shadow functions unconsciously through our genetics on a certain level. No matter how much our brains are thinking ideas that are like, yeah, I don't do control and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, well, do you control your own schedule? Do you, there are so many ways that we can engage with this, and not to make any way that we engage in our life process as being wrong or less than by being part of a shadow frequency. But it feels as if there's more to the frequency available of this control when we begin to look at these words of submission and authority, or surrender, which tends to carry a somewhat more chivalrous quality to it from the spiritual perspective. But what you're describing in this ceremony type setting is this, it's so interesting that you're identifying the masculine quality of this energy, which I wholeheartedly agree with. And yet the way to embody that energy and express it to a group is through an inner feminine process of surrendering to the need of the group, of absolutely surrendering oneself to become the instrument of transformation that is being required by that specific group in that specific moment, with no thought for one's own needs or one's own direction of how they are desiring to be or show up or express themselves. And I think one of the things that is really significant about this gene key is how it gives us a look into what marriage actually can produce. And in the West, in lots of places around the world beyond just being in the West, marriage is this rite that takes place between a man and a woman that is mostly about possessions and about, their legal rights in regards to each other and to, you know, whatever possessions they may share. And when we look at this, you know, this gene key is connected to the fourth initiation of matrimony, which is the word that relates to marriage. And when we truly look at what does marriage signify on a spiritual level, is that inner surrendering of one's own desire to be a certain thing, to fulfill the role that one is built for. And in a way, it's really a beautiful way of just looking at, well, how do we engage with human design? How do we engage with the gene keys? Aren't we actually, as we consider these shadow and gift frequencies and even the Siddhic frequencies within our own profiles, our within our charts and everything, aren't we just really trying to get to a moment of our experience where we can fully surrender every pattern that we've layered onto our personality to become the mechanism that we were built for? And when I think about that, that doesn't really line up with very many ideas about leadership, at least in the United States that I've been exposed to. There's not a whole lot of people out there talking about leadership who are just saying, surrender to become the vessel through which the group can achieve what is needed. And because I think we're still so hung up on patriarchy, evil, and matriarchy as the maybe solution to the evil of the patriarchy, and you know, all of these sort of things. And I just sort of wonder, how our relationship between the polarity between men and women, or between the sexes of men and women, between the partners who engage in a marriage, between this relationship between the boss and the employee. What's going on in these relationships that we haven't yet found the way through? You know, what are we holding on to that is like stopping us from being able to experience this deeper level of self?
Yeah, it feels like you're going back to the wound or Chiron, our hero's journey again. And somehow, as we're speaking about those polarities, and for me, they are very present in the 21 and the 48, the programming partners, a way of simplifying contraction is fear. And I believe that in the masculine and the feminine, in all of us, in each human being, and between the sexes, and between the boss and the employee, the masculine principle is here to penetrate, and the feminine principle is here to receive. That is our superpower. And with the wound, with the fear, for the feminine, there is this hesitancy to receive 100%. And receiving 99% is not receiving. And then in the masculine, there is this fear of not being received. So as you penetrate the world, the woman, then you're not going to be received, or in ourselves as well. So we're not completely receiving ourselves. And there is this wound of rejection, you know, and the wound of, so for me, that's what's going on. And I believe somehow the question here is, how ready are we to love? Because again, I do not believe that we can come to a solution by saying, okay, I'm now up to 89% of receiving. Let me just add a 0.5% all the time. No, the question can never go, it's not logical. So I feel like the question to ask is, how ready am I to love? You know, Because in that, when you, like you say, when we come into our true blueprint, whether we are more in the feminine pole or in the masculine pole, it doesn't actually matter the sexes even. Like whatever is your truth, what you're resonating with, then you're going to be able to love through that. So it doesn't matter if you love more through penetration or you love more through receiving. But when you're ready to love, the geometry is opening up for what you are here to give or receive. And like you're saying, I think that is so important to say as well, because here we can come into stereotypes and say, yeah, but you know, and I love to go into stereotypes. And I actually do believe, like I said at the time, that before the female heart is open, I do not see this planet going anywhere. So, you know, I could go into that as well. But when you're saying in the masculine and in this process of authority, of whether we call it the taita or the manager or the man, whatever we want to call it, you can see there that already there, we always have this intertwined, this coiled polarity of the surrender together with the stepping forward, with the penetration. So it's there in, it's there in the smallest particle too, the polarity, because that's the magnetism, that's the electricity of everything.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up magnetism and electricity, because those two forces of energy are what represent the penetrative power of electricity, or the receiving power of magnetism. And once we identify a preferred version of loving, it seems in my experience that that particular favoring begins to overshadow the potential that we have as a mechanism of the collective. So whatever my unique makeup is, whatever your unique makeup is, Bella, as long as you or I hold some form of resistance, whether it be conscious, subconscious, or even unconscious resistance to the opposite polarity, the magnetism for me. If I resist being penetrated, or if you, for instance, resist being, I guess, for you, it would be magnetized. I don't know exactly how that works. But as I'm speaking about it, I'm thinking, well, okay, if you kind of fall on the magnetic spectrum, Bella, then that means I guess that would mean if you resist penetrating another, you know, then somehow there's going to be some version of energy that shows up where our mechanism may not be fully utilized to the good of the collective, no matter what it is that our role happens to be. And I have this very strong intuition and feeling that, like, all of the power for whatever our preferred version of loving, for me, maybe it's electrical and penetrative, I'm losing penetrative power if I don't allow myself to be penetrated, to experience magnetism, to experience receiving the other. And even though it's not what it feels like I'm fully built for, it feels like if I hold that away, suddenly all of the power that I have to penetrate the other, whether the other is the spiritual realm, or it's a material realm, or it's an emotional realm of a partner, or what have you, suddenly I have almost no vitality in that activity. And then I end up in a situation where, in order to try to fulfill my role as a mechanistic being, I have to control somebody outside of myself or a situation outside of myself so that I can do the thing that I'm supposedly built for. And yet, my control of that situation is the evidence that shows me that I'm not fulfilling my role, at least not fully. And I'm not sure that I don't know that there's another way to do that other than facing that wound, of coming to the moment where we're willing to accept what the person that the wound makes us become in our own mind. Because I feel like a lot of times we have this idea about ourselves that kind of keeps that wound outside of it. Like, who am I becoming without the wound, or without my past, or without this or that thing that I don't like, and it just feels like this whole process of looking at leadership and following and authority and control, it has all to do with how much are we willing to just let go. And I don't know if you've experienced this, Bella, but on numerous occasions, I've been working with somebody who was wanting to transform in one way or another. And they would get to this point of needing to let go of something and feeling like, I don't know how to let go of this or that, a memory or an experience. I don't know how to let go anymore. And it's almost like you can't describe it. How do you describe letting go? If you can't, a lot of times you just say, well, just open your hand, don't hold it anymore. But it's like, in the experience, it's like, I don't even know that I'm holding it. How I don't have control over this hand. It's like stuck. So Bella, what do you have some final thoughts on this archetype, this energy, this quality that we've been discussing, and how it's impacting our pathway forward?
I mean, I don't believe it's a cliche, although it can sound like that. But when you feel like this, the question again is, how ready am I to love? Because that is going to dissolve whatever is stuck. And then the other thing that I really feel, we were speaking about Chiron, but I can also see this for all the gene key people that are watching. This is happening in our own hologenetic profile. So there is this loop that is going on between the core wound and the IQ and the mind. We know that the mind is connected to control. So what I see is that when the mind comes in, it tries to control our world so that we don't feel the imprinting in the emotions, the EQ, the imprinting in the SQ, the child imprinting, and even like the imprinting of the stuck energy in the attraction, the sexuality, how much we can receive or how much we can penetrate. So instead we cling to that IQ and we are controlling with our mind so that we don't feel the wound. Because at the end of the day, it's like this trail where the attraction and the EQ and the SQ is just leading us back to that wound that we decided to come in and work with. But the mind is that controlling agent, the shadow of this gene key that keeps us in the loop of not wanting to look at that wound, but then going around in circles. And those circles, it's when we are holding not just one thing, but we're holding the things like this. And like you say, we're not even able, because from the place of the mind, we cannot actually even understand that we're doing it. But when we include the life force of the attraction, we include the emotions and the freezing that happened there in our adolescence, and we go back all the way to the body and to the heart and to the inner child that hasn't been parented, like with the inclusion. And this again, like you're saying, if if you are resisting that other polarity of what you are because you're whole, then you can never be in power in that one thing because you're here to be whole. And that is the same thing exactly with the Venus work. If there is a fragmentation, there's going to be this holding on consciously, unconsciously. And the more we can include those parts of us, the more we have the courage to sit in that ceremony, whether the ceremony is with ourselves and all the parts of us, or it's a symbolic ceremony with somebody else. Like, we sit in that ceremony and we're reclaiming, we're bringing home all the parts of us, and we're allowing that surrendering, like we're allowing the true process of clearing out what's not ours, because it's going to go. When we bring everything home, what isn't truly us is going to leave. It's going to dissipate. So for me, I mean, it feels very valuable to sit here and speak in this community about this, because we have tools. It's not just like, again, like, oh, just let go of it. You know, you sit there as some kind of authority telling somebody else to let go because you have. No, we actually have tools. We have pathways where we can go, and it's all going to, for all of us, it's going to be a different journey, but somehow our blueprint is showing us that there is a way home, and that if we have enough courage, enough love, wholeness is not a it's not a utopia. It's there. Wholeness is just there. And it's just the remembering of all the parts of us and the wanting to include them. How ready are we to love? How ready are we to love all of it? For me, that is the grail question in this case, you know.
I love that answer, because, you know, it brings back to that awareness that you can't solve a problem when you're within it. So for any challenge that we may be experiencing, whether we're holding on to something that we can't seem to let go of, or we keep attracting that situation that we want to be finished with, you know, our mind often says, how do we stop this situation from occurring? How do I let go of this thing that I can't let go of? How do I stop that type of person from showing up and blowing my life up? How do I stop this event or situation from ruining my day? And when you step into a higher frequency, you see that there's no need to fix the problem. You only offer your love to the aspect of yourself that is engaging with that problem. So, can you love yourself for holding on for too long? Can you love yourself for recreating that loop for the 10th time that you had already told yourself with your willpower you were going to make it go away? And when we look at this from the perspective of leadership, you know, approaching that subject from that place feels like a completely different paradigm. And I hope that each of us can become, you know, more of the leaders of our own individual lives with that type of an attitude, leading ourselves forward with the awareness and the willingness to offer love to the places that don't want to be fixed, that don't want to move. As our awareness grows, I mean, how much more judgment do we have access to? It just gets subtler and subtler, and it just feels really like a powerful transformation is possible for us through all of this. So I see our time is moving on. For those of you joining us on Facebook, right now, this is our final scheduled public streaming of a Lunar Alchemy discussion. In the future, we will be offering it for free, the same, our regular weekly discussions. However, we will be asking you to register and commit to attend those if you desire to be a part of these discussions. And we'll get more details out very shortly about that for you, so that you don't miss a session if you enjoy following our discussions live. So that will be forthcoming. And I want to thank you for joining us for today's session, speaking about Gene Key 21 and the manager. And we will look forward to seeing you in our new container in the future. Our next scheduled discussion is going to take place April 7th. That's a Thursday. So we'll look forward to seeing you then. Bye-bye for now.